When we think of Rome, we think of a magnificent empire controlling the entire Mediterranean with sprawling armies, ambitious rulers, and ungodly technological advancement. However, as the proverb says, Rome wasn't built in a day. Rather, over centuries, Rome expanded from 7 humble hills to 3 continents and 2.3 million square miles. But how was Rome able to expand at such an unprecedented rate and conquer so much land? While Romans are known for their determination, courage, and technological superiority, it was their ability to incorporate new people into the nation that led to this rapid growth. To understand what about the Roman nation led to such vast expansion, we must first understand what a nation is and how it grows. Hans Morgenthau, a German-American judge and political scientist, says that a nation cannot be seen. What can be empirically observed are only the individuals who belong to a nation, who have certain characteristics in common, and it is these characteristics that make them members of the same nation. A nation, as he explains, is not defined by geographic borders like a country or empire, but instead a nation is defined by the people living in it. Travis Roberts at the University of Rhode Island explains the commonalities between the people in a nation. He says that they have a name, a shared history, a common homeland, a common culture, and most importantly, the willingness of people to die for the nation. For example, America has a name, a shared history dating back to Christopher Columbus, whether or not this is historically accurate, a common homeland even though it has expanded from 13 to 50 states, a common culture through American holidays such as the 4th of July, and the willingness of citizens to die for their nation, as they have throughout American history. Going back to Rome, we can clearly see the existence of a Roman nation through the common culture of the Roman Empire that fulfills these requirements. Unlike America, the Roman nation grew primarily through conquest rather than immigration. This conquest caused non-Romans to be incorporated into the Roman nation in a process known as Romanization. Travis Roberts and Arthur Eckstein argue that Romanization is what allowed the empire to grow, because it gave Rome a national unity that other city-states lacked. This unity bolstered the Roman military and prevented rebellion at home. However, scholars have disagreed about how Romanization happens, and over time the understanding of this process has evolved significantly. This video explores how the meaning of Romanization has changed over time and searches for an accurate definition. The term Romanization first appeared in John Fletcher's 1609 play Bonduca, but was not used meaningfully until Theodor Mausmann's Römische Geschichte in 1885. Mausmann argued that culture was evolutionary and that native people would progress until they become civilized. He said that this evolution was the result of action from the Roman elites to spread their culture and quote-unquote civilize native peoples. Importantly, he saw this as a one-way street, with non-Romans becoming more Roman, but Roman culture never changing. His research, however, faced backlash for inadequate citations and evidence. His work was thus deemed a popular history, for portraying a narrative many wanted to hear, but not one that was necessarily historically accurate. To understand why it was called a popular history, we need to go back to the British Empire, where Rome was seen as a symbol of power, peace, and unity. In 1586, William Camden wrote Britannica, attempting to establish Britain as an heir of the Roman Empire. This parallel continued into the 20th century when the British Empire began to expand rapidly. Mausmann's view of Romanization matched up with British views of colonization at the time, which rewarded civilized behavior and punished others. His work attempted to paint Roman expansion in this way to justify the actions of the British and other imperial empires at the time. He was not alone, as in 1905, Francis Haverfield published The Romanization of Britain. In a 1911 lecture, Haverfield said, "The methods by which Rome incorporated, denationalized, and assimilated more than half of its wide dominions, and the success of Rome in spreading its Greco-Roman culture concerns in many ways our own age and empire." He argued that Romanization had 2 parts, incorporation and assimilation. Incorporation, he said, involves military conquest and building barriers such as Hadrian's Wall in Britain to physically incorporate new land into Rome. Assimilation, he said, was more complex, involving the Roman government encouraging the development of Roman culture in newly conquered lands until they become part of the Roman nation. This view is patronizing as it paints a picture of cultured Romans taking over and civilizing quote-unquote lost people. However, it does not differ from the views of the British Empire at the time. Haverfield went on to say that the men of the Roman Empire wrought for the betterment and the happiness of the world, a view similar to that of the British. Haverfield, just like the British, assumed that all people wanted to become part of their quote-unquote civilized society, failing to understand that which is different from them. Modern scholars understand Romanization to be a back-and-forth process. Rather than being orchestrated by the Roman government, as previous scholars believed, it involved local people choosing to exchange and fuse Roman customs with their own. This fusion created a new culture that was neither fully Roman nor entirely native. Local people made active choices motivated by economic opportunity, technological advancement, or societal pressure. We can understand this process better by looking at 3 specific examples of Roman expansion throughout the Italian peninsula. The first comes from northern Italy, where native cultures used bronze dippers to honor their gods. Each dipper represented a specific god with both an image of that god and its name on the handle. However, after the first Roman contact in the 1st century BCE, the statues took a more Roman style, with the writing on the handle initially changing to Latin. Eventually, these artifacts came to represent Roman gods, replacing the native ones. This was not an uncommon experience, as in Britain, the local god Solus was combined with the Roman god Minerva to create Solus Minerva. It is important to note that in this process, existing traditions were not erased, as the existence of Roman dippers and Solus being part of Solus Minerva proves the ceremony still happened and local customs were preserved. Another example comes through the language that non-Romans spoke and their eventual transition to Latin. As the Roman Empire expanded throughout the Italian peninsula, the lives of people living outside of Rome became more Roman. One side effect of this is that in areas of Roman control, people gradually began to speak Latin, like in the city of Tudor. The first change was to transition to the left-to-right writing style, unlike the right-to-left style under the native Umbrian language, followed eventually by a transition to Latin characters. Lastly, the cultural acceptance of Latin can be seen in the names of the children as they became Roman and as people began to speak Latin at home. These citizens were not forced to speak Latin, but chose to do so for the economic opportunities it provided through trade. Lastly, as the Italian city-states grew more Roman, Rome allied with them during the Second Punic War. As non-Romans died alongside Romans in the war, the connection between these cultures became stronger and the Roman nation grew. During the war, the city-states never threatened to break the alliance and were instead willing to die for the Roman cause. The cultural similarity as well as the willingness of the people to die for Rome made them part of the Roman nation. They were, however, not Roman citizens, creating a 2-tiered society. As the Roman business class began to exploit the Italians for profit, many Italians began to fight back, leading to the Social War. The unified Italian city-states successfully fought Rome and became Roman citizens. This story was not unique to the Italian peninsula, and as the Roman Empire continued to expand throughout the Mediterranean, Romanization allowed it to incorporate new citizens. However, just as the expansion of citizenship today through processes like immigration faced backlash from people who are afraid their nation is being eroded, Roman expansion did as well. The Roman satirical poet Juvenal wrote in around 100 CE, "Non possum fere quirites Graecum urbam," meaning I cannot bear fellow Romans a Greek city. Many Romans began to oppose further expansion of the nation, even though they or their ancestors were once non-Romans too. As a result, the Romans began to limit citizenship, creating a 2-tiered society that eventually led to people like Alaric the Goth to rebel for citizenship. Unlike the Social War, which unified Rome, these rebellions would tear Rome apart from the inside, eventually leading to its collapse.